Alrighty. Hello, everyone. This is the first video of Chapter 4 lectures about defining and explaining leisure behavior. This is an overview of Chapter 4. We will talk about three main things. First being, how do we define leisure today? We explored different meanings of leisure in terms of humanities and arts, and also historical perspective. Now we learned about the definition of leisure today. Secondly, we will move on to basically some of the explanation about why certain people do, certain type of leisure activity behaviors while other people do others. We will explore those explanations. And there's the second major topic would be about demographic explanations. And the third topic will be about theoretical, more research-based explanations. In terms of third, we will talk about, chapter talked about four major disciplines from which we got our theories. First being psychology, second being sociology, third being political science, and fourth being anthropology. And I will tell you though in advance that we will not focus in this lecture, in this course, political science theories. Specifically, the chapter talked about Tolstoy and Veblen's theory, which already talked in a previous lecture. So please take a look at that. You don't have to understand political science here in this chapter particularly. Partly because Veblen's work is not really considered to be political science. It's more of a sociological and economic perspectives rather than political science. So today's meanings of leisure. Your chapter textbook lists three themes of leisure meanings, and they're very, very important. The first being leisure as a free time. The second is leisure as a recreational activity. And the third is leisure as a special spirit. That's what the chapter said. But in this course, in our class, we will call it as a psychological experience. And you have to understand each. Some of these definitions have limitations. And you want to understand how those limitations leads to another perspective. The first contemporary understanding of leisure is leisure as free time. And here, leisure is defined as a time free from obligations, very straightforward. And obligation here means paid and non-paid work, such as housework. And these time, free discretionary time can be used for personal choice, whatever you want to do, basically. Now, in terms of that, there are very, very interesting differences in terms of how much free time we tend to have across different countries. I'm assuming most of you are living in or from Canada, okay? And this is the data from OECD 2016. And numbers a little bit different from the ones that you saw in the chapter because this one exclude holidays, okay? National holidays, they're apart. These are only annual paid leave. So you get paid once you start work, right? You have to work, but there are a certain number of days you can get paid while you can have a free time, which is great, right? So it's one of those things you want to think about when you're deciding what kind of job you want to get, and more importantly, where do you want to live? Where do you want to start your career? The fact that you're from Canada doesn't have to be staying, you have to stay in Canada. I'm from Japan and I'm having a career in Canada. You can go to different countries. So here's some choice. If you go to USA, the bad news is 0 paid leave days, legally mandated. So there's that problem. Canada, Japan, 10 days. Last time I checked, South Korea, 15, which sounds better. Australia have 20 paid annual leaves. Germany as well. That's a lot. That's good. France, UK, 25, 28. For example, France is very famous for this cultural tradition to have, I don't know the French pronunciation, but it's, I think, called a vacances. It's basically extended vacation. Sometimes it's like a few months, basically. And they go somewhere relaxing or fun and explore. And I think that is that's reflected in here, the number of the paid leaves. So think about this, free time issue. when you want to look for career in a country you want to have your job in. Now, what is very important is that this perspective, this leisure as a free time definition is limitation in couple important ways. First, from this perspective, leisure is considered to be leftover, something dependent on other things in our life. What do I mean by that? Well, from this perspective, leisure or free time is calculated basically. First, think about how many hours are you putting into work. Let's say you're putting 7 hours per day into work, right? 7. How many hours do you need for survival? Like eating, sleeping, all that kind of stuff. Let's say 10 hours, right? 7 plus 10, that's 17. And you subtract that from 24, that's what, 7 hours left over? Now that is your leisure time per day. That's your free time per day. So in this equation, really, leisure is left over. It's sort of inferior to other things. It assumes that other things like work and survival are more important. So in our field, we don't really appreciate this perspective. And also, in terms of this course, particularly about leisure and happiness, we have also evidence that the free time, amount of free time, how much free time you have, is not correlated to your happiness level. Maybe very, slightly, but it's very weak. It makes sense though, right? If you think about it, it's not really about how much of free time you have, but how you use it, which is more important. Because you could arguably have so much free time and you can just get bored and not really happy. Those limitations make us move to the second perspective of leisure as a recreational activity. So it's not just about, how much time you have, but how you use it with activities. From this perspective, leisure is considered to be certain types of recreational activity. For example, in Statistics Canada, so that's our statistical agency in Canada, it's in the government basically, right? They have this 6 major categories of leisure activity. And in each of them, there's like so many dozens of subcategories. But if you do those activities, that is considered to be leisure, okay, from this perspective. Socializing, like, having conversation, fun, talking with friends, those kind of stuff, that's leisure. Watching TV, other passive leisure activity, like listening to CDs, that's a very old-fashioned. More like Spotify recently. Doing active sports, other active leisure, not just the physical one, but also learning, cognitively active activities. So if you do that, that counts as a leisure. Now the problem or difficulty with this perspective is that really having a comprehensive list of activity, you have to have a long list, right? Otherwise, there are so many new recreation activities that are invented every day almost, or every year, every week probably, with the technology now. So it's really difficult to keep it up, to be honest. Another sad news is that from this perspective, one of the most common leisure activity, recreational activity, is TV watching. Like, a lot of people spend a lot of time on leisure recreation. The findings just converge on that. That's the major finding. And it's really difficult to look at the different things sometimes. And this is a big limitation. This perspective creates a conundrum. It's like a really difficulty. Now you see two pictures at the bottom, right? What are they doing in these pictures, activity-wise? And now you're thinking about, gee, that's tennis, right? Yeah, it's tennis. It's simple, it's tennis. Now, the question is, are these really the same in terms of, in activity-wise, it's tennis, it's the same, okay? So this second perspective of leisure as a recreation activity does not differentiate them from each other. They're doing recreation activity, therefore it's leisure. Although it's kind of weird because right side picture is more of a job. Anyway, we know that, but let's say. On the left side picture, right? It's a picture of a group of 4 people, maybe friends. They're having maybe enjoying tennis, friendly match. I don't know, Sunday morning, that kind of thing, maybe, right? And on top of that, the person in the center, the guy with the no sleeves, he doesn't look like, good at the tennis, to be honest. Not to me, not to me. It's very maybe, casual. It's very relaxed. On the right side though, do you know who this is? Yes, Serena Williams. She's one of the best tennis players. She's not just one of the best female tennis players. She's one of the best tennis players in the world, one of the most competitive athletes, doing the tennis, doing her, what she does. Now, once again, are they really, really the same thing? So now you see, and you can probably see, like, no, they're 2 different things. Beyond the fact that, yes, Serena is doing this for the career and job, but beyond that, there's so much difference, probably, psychologically speaking, probably, right? The left side is very casual, relaxed, fun type of activity, leisure activity. Right side, very serious, committed, right? Competitive, even sometimes stressful, right? It's not really fun, maybe, for Serena sometimes. So they're very different things. This second perspective of leisure as a recreational activity does not differentiate that, does not really help us understand the difference here. Now, that's why we often take this third perspective of leisure as a psychological experience. From this perspective, leisure is more than free time or activity. It's a certain kind of state of mind, right? The chapter talks about feelings of freedom, happiness, maybe self-enrichment, and a personal fulfillment. Very positive. Another famous experience that tends to be considered as maybe leisure is a psychologist, Csikszentmihalyi's concept called flow. You may have heard that. Or if you do sports and if you're an athlete, you may have heard a phenomenon called a zone. You're into the zone, right? Which we're going to talk later in this chapter more. Another psychological experience that's very leisurely is John Newlinger's pure leisure. We learn about leisure paradigm and a pure leisure. Specifically, intrinsic motivation and a perceived freedom. They're considered to be very leisurely psychological experiences. So when you see, when people are having those subjective psychological experiences, that's leisure. And you see these things can differentiate potentially the 2 different types of tennis that we saw on the last chapter. Maybe Serena having more of a zone type of experience, as opposed to the left side friendly picture is more about, freedom and intrinsic motivation. So how do people define leisure today? People as in what we call lay people or normal, ordinary people who are not, working in a leisure profession, or who are not leisure researcher. They're having what's called a free listing studies with the U of A students. So it's like you guys. Yeah, of course, not you, but previous generations. What they did was it's very simple. They did a paper and a pencil questionnaire, and part of that was open-ended question. There's leisure, right? And there's a blank line, and it goes like 10 of those things. So you can define leisure in 10 different ways, whatever you want, right? With putting a sentence or word in it. And these researchers, there are 2 different studies, and they basically summarize those open-ended answers from U of A students. And these are, of course, not KSR, Kinesiology, Sports and Recreation students only. They're from all over the U of A. Now, these are some of the most common themes and meanings that they found in their data. And I'm going to highlight some of them. First, these red one, emotion, arousal or relaxation, freedom. They strongly speak to the last perspective that we just looked at, leisure as a psychological experience, right? So actually, normal, ordinary lay people, U of A students agree with that, actually. Now, secondly, this blue one, time. This corresponds to the first perspective of leisure as a free time. And then finally, these yellow mass media, active sports, social activities, they tend to, and also sports and physical activity here in the middle, right side, they also correspond to the second perspective of leisure as a recreational activities, right? So really, these three perspectives or three themes of leisure meanings today covered quite a bit, the majority of lay people's definitions of leisure as well. It seems to work. And then finally, I would like to revisit some of the researchers' academic definitions of leisure today. One at the top from Bob Stebbins, a retired professor from University of Calgary. And once again, you saw that already before, but I'm highlighting different words here. Same definition, highlighting different words. For example, first, activity. That signal leisure as a recreational activity, right? Engaged in during free time. That's the leisure as a free time. The last part about satisfying or fulfilling, to me, represents the leisure as a psychological experience. So you can see the three different themes of leisure right there. Another academic definition of leisure right there, bottom, by Gui et al. By the way, this Gui person is my wife as well. Yes, my wife and a colleague. Yes, but I'm objective. It's a good definition. Okay, here you go. She defined leisure as, after research, she defined it as positive mental states, right? So that's psychological leisure as a psychological experiences. And the second line says unobligated activities. Again, it's a recreational activities. And the last one is during free time. Again, leisure as a free time. So again, these three themes tends to keep coming up. They're very important. They're very comprehensive, I would say. So it's very important for you to know that and to be able to differentiate that. Okay, and also to know the limitations of some of the definitions and perspectives we just talked about. Okay. So what's the point really here is that both lay people, ordinary people, and researchers agreed on the multi-dimensional definition of leisure. Leisure is not just a free time. Yeah, there's a time component, but that's not just only that. Leisure has an activity component, but it's not just that. And then finally, leisure also has that psychological subjective element to it too. So it's really multi-dimensional. And that's what I want you to really understand as well. Okay, I think this is the end of first video, and I will see you in the next video.